Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is North of Fair Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. It is 7 o'clock. Yeah, I wish it was, but anyways, it's 9:08 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here in Southern Ontario. It always helps when you have the right topic up on the show to talk about what you're going to talk about. So, anyways, get all that corrected. Hope everybody had a good week. It is now officially the weekend. Now, ideology, expression, freedom of speech. As humans, we're thinkers. Everyone's ideology is different. Take homosexuality, politics, and religion. Human thrives on diversity of thought, and ideology is one of the richest expressions of that. When we look at topics like homosexuality, politics, and religion, we're diving into areas where personal experiences, cultural background, education, and even emotional resonance shape how people see the world. Homosexuality, cultural, and generational shifts have led to growing acceptance globally, especially in Western societies. In the United States, for example, 70% of people say now homosexuality should be accepted, up from just 24% decades ago. Religion plays a major role in shaping views. Those with more traditional religion beliefs often express less support for the LGBTQ rights. Political ideology often reflects deeper values: individual freedoms versus collective responsibility, tradition versus progressive, nationalism versus globalism. Even with the democracies, the divide between progressive and conservatives can be vast, especially on social issues like the LGBTQ rights, immigration, or climate policy. Religion can be a source of comfort, identity, and moral guidance, but also a point of contention. Some religious traditions embrace LGBT individuals and progressive politics, while others see these as incompatible with other doctrines. Interestingly, many people believe mortality doesn't require belief in God, a view that's grown significantly in recent years. And what's fascinating is how these ideologies intersect. For example, someone might be politically conservative but socially liberal, or deeply religious yet supportive of the LGBTQ rights. It's not always black and white, and that's what makes human thought so compelling. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Where do we draw the line? In Canada, freedom of expression is protected under Section 2, subsection B of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but it's not absolute. The law draws a line where speech begins to harm others or threaten public order. Hate speech, speech that incites violence or hatred against identifiable groups based on race, religion, gender, etc., is prohibited. Obscenity and child exploitation, material deemed obscene or exploitative, especially involving minors, is strictly banned. Defamation and libel. You can't publicly make false statements that damage someone's reputation. That's a civil offense. Incitement to violence or crime, speech that encourage criminal activity or violence, is not protected. False news and public mischief. Deliberately spreading false information that causes panic or harm can be penalized. Commercial restrictions in Quebec, for example, signage must prioritize French over English. This was ruled a reasonable but limit to protect cultural identities. Canada uses Section 1 of the Charter to allow reasonable limits on free speech, as long as they're justifiable in a free and democratic society. And courts often ask, does the speech cause real harm? Is the restriction proportional? Is there a less intrusive way to achieve the same goal? And why this matters. Freedom of speech is essential for democracy, holding leaders accountable, truth-seeking, challenging norms, and discovering new ideas, self-expression, living authentically and creatively. But unchecked speech can also be weaponized. The line is drawn where expression becomes oppression. We'll take Jordan Peterson for an example. Peterson is a lightning rod in Canada's free speech debate. In his case is a masterclass in how complex the boundaries of expression can be when professional regulation enters the picture. And what sparked this controversy? Back in 2016, Peterson publicly opposed Bill C-16, which added gender identity and expression to Canada's Human Rights Act. He argued that compelled use of gender pronouns violated free speech. That stance catapulted him into global fame and controversy. Fast forward to 2022 and 2024, the College of Psychologists of Ontario ordered Peterson to undergo social media training after complaints about his online posts, which they deemed degrading and potentially harmful to the profession's reputation. Peterson argued his comments were made as a private citizen, not in his capacity as a psychologist. He appealed the decision all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, which declined to hear the case. And ultimately, Peterson agreed to attend the training, but called it a form of ideological re-education. His online post of shaming. But then he was making these comments as a private citizen. I don't know, that's some sort of scapegoat. It's okay as a private citizen to go on our platforms and shame people. That makes it okay, according to how he feels, his thought. Why it matters? This case raises a critical question. Can professionals be punished for speech made outside their official duties? Peterson's supporters argue that regulatory bodies are overreaching, threatening the free expression of anyone in a licensed profession, from doctors to teachers. Critics say that public figures with professional titles carry influence and must be held to a higher standard. Peterson's ordeal isn't just about him. It's about the tension between personal liberty and institutional accountability. It shows how freedom of speech can clash with professional ethics, especially in a digital age where every tweet can be scrutinized. We know what happened recently. Charlie Kirk. I don't know him from a hole in the ground. I don't follow him. I only knew anything about Jordan Peterson when it came about that he was making these these remarks in shaming people on social platforms. Charlie Kirk's story is a deeply polarizing and tragic chapter in the conversation about free speech, political ideology, and the consequences of public discourse. He was a prominent conservative activist and founder of Turning Point USA, a youth-oriented political organization known for its strong support for Donald Trump and its confrontational style on college campuses. He built his brand on debating progressive students and challenging liberal ideologies, often through provocative statements and viral videos. The assassination on September 10th, 2025, Kirk was shot and killed while speaking at a Utah Valley University during a campus debate. The shooter fired from a rooftop, striking Kirk in the neck as he responded to a question about transgender mass shooters. The attack was captured on video and widely circulated online, sparking outrage and grief across the political spectrum. The fallout: Donald Trump called Kirk a martyr for truth and freedom and blamed radical left rhetoric for inciting violence. World leaders, including Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney, condemned the murder and emphasized the importance of protecting democratic debate. Social media platforms face pressure to remove graphic footage, igniting debates about censorship versus public awareness. European Parliament saw clashes over whether to honor Kirk with a moment of silence, revealing deep ideological divides. Free speech versus political violence. Kirk's death has become a flashpoint in the broader conversation about the limits of free speech. Should controversial figures be silenced or protected? The role of rhetoric: can inflammatory speech be blamed for inciting violence? The fragility of civil discourse: are we losing the ability to disagree without dehumanizing? See, he was a figure who thrived on ideological confrontation. Whether you agree with him or not, his assassination has forced a reckoning. How do we protect free speech while preventing it from becoming a trigger of violence? Violence has solved nothing. Freedom of speech at its core, freedom of speech is about protecting dissent. It's what's allowed people to challenge authority, question norms, and express unpopular opinions. But in Canada, as you know, it's not unlimited. The Charter protects it, but reasonable limits exist, especially where speech becomes harmful. In Kirk's case, his critics argue that his rhetoric was inflammatory, while his supporters saw him as a truth teller. Silenced by ideological opponents, the tragedy of his assassination forces us to ask: should controversial speech be protected, even if it provokes outrage? Can institutions regulate speech without suppressing dissent? The role of rhetoric isn't just what's said, it's how it's said. And what stirs in others: Kirk's speeches were often confrontational, designed to provide strong reactions. That's part of what made him effective and divisive. But rhetoric can escalate. When political language becomes dehumanizing or at risk, pushing unstable individuals towards violence, The shooter in Kirk's case reportedly cited ideological motives, which raises the uncomfortable question. Can speech be morally or legally responsible for the actions it inspires? The fragility of civil discourse. This is the quiet crisis beneath it all. Civil discourse, the ability to disagree respectfully, is eroding. Online platforms reward outrage, not nuance. Debates become tribal. And when someone like Kirk is killed for expressing his views, it sends a chilling message. Are we losing the ability to argue without turning each other into enemies? Freedom of speech isn't just legal principle, it's a cultural battleground. And the line between what's allowed and what's misunderstood is constantly shifting. And in Canada, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees free expression, but the right is subject to reasonable limits. The problem, what's reasonable, is often ideologically loaded. Progressives may argue that speech causing emotional harm or marginalization should be restricted. Libertarians and conservatives often push back, saying that discomfort isn't the same as harm, and the truth often begins as offense. This ideological tension leads to misunderstandings, especially when laws like Bill C-11 and Bill C-18 come into play. These laws regulate online content and media funding, and critics say they give the government too much control, over what can be said and who gets heard. And here's where things get murky. Hate speech is illegal, but what qualifies as hate? Is misgendering someone hate or just rude? Disinformation is targeted, but who decides what's false? Government? Tech platforms? Offensive opinions are often censored, but offense is subjective. One person's truth is another's trauma. As one article put it, Canada's free speech culture has shifted from collective truth-seeking to individual expression, making it easier to override speech in the name of safety or inclusion. And the real danger, when ideology drives censorship, we risk creating a society where people self-censor out of fear, not respect. Debate becomes tribal, not thoughtful. Institutions lose credibility because they're seen as ideological enforcers. Conversations like this don't just stir up differences, they reveal values, challenge assumptions, and sometimes even reshape beliefs. The fact that freedom of speech can mean radically different things to different people is proof that it's not just a legal concept, it's a living, breathing tension in society. Some people see it as a shield for truth, others see it as a weapon for harm. And in between, there's a messy, uncomfortable space where people's real dialogue happens. That's where growth lives. Think about how Charlie Kirk's death, Jordan Peterson legal battles, or even campus debates in Ontario forced people to ask, what kind of society do we want to be? Do we value open disagreement, or do we prioritize emotional safety? Can we hold space for both? These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary ones. And the fact that you're willing to engage with them means you're not just thinking, you're participating in the shaping of culture. Campus speech over over fear over freedom. And recent surveys point a troubling picture of Canadian universities. And 48% of students say they hide their real opinions on controversial topics like immigration, gender, or religion, not out of shyness, but out of fear. Conservative and moderate students are the most likely to self censor, fearing grade penalties or social backlash. Jewish students report the highest levels of daily discrimination, with 69% unwilling to speak on religion issues. Even through moderates and conservatives now outnumber liberals on campus, their voices are often suppressed. This isn't just discomfort, it's a chilling effect. Universities, which should be arenas for intellectual combat, are becoming echo chambers. Ontario tried to counter this by requiring universities to adopt free speech policies, modeled after the Chicago principles, which emphasizes open debate, even of offensive, unwise, or wrong-headed ideas. But here's the catch. Even with policies in place, cultural trumps regulation. If students fear reprisal, the policies are just paper shields. Now we shift to the digital battlefield. Canada proposed Online Harms Act, Bill C-63, is stirring major controversy. It creates a digital safety commission with sweeping powers to regulate online platforms. Social media companies could face massive fines for failing to remove harmful content, including hate speech and misinformation. The bill allows anonymous reporting of online speech, raising fears of politically weaponized complaints. Some provisions even allow preemptive punishment, restrictions based on what someone might say in the future. Critics argue that there's duplicates of existing laws and opens the door to bureaucratic censorship. Supporters say it's necessary to protect vulnerable groups and curb online abuse. But the deeper issue, self-censorship, when people fear being flagged, banned, or investigated, they stop speaking freely. And that's how democratic discourse erodes, not through overt bans, but through quiet silencing. Now, the Canadian campuses were once temples of debate. Now, many feel like ideological minefields. Speech codes in safe spaces aim to protect students, but critics say they often suppress dissent. Student unions increasingly deny platforms to speakers deemed harmful, even if they're legally protected. Faculty self-censorship is rising. Professors avoid controversial topics to dodge backlash or disciplinary action. Take the University of Toronto. After Jordan Peterson's rise, the school faced intense scrutiny over its handling of free speech. Some faculty supported him, others feared his views would legitimize discrimination, and the result, a fractured academic culture where open inquiry feels risky. And yet, universities are supposed to be the place where ideas clash, not where they're created for comfort. Now, the social media, the algorithm, the arbiter, now shift to the digital realm where speech isn't just regulated by law, but by code. Platforms like X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok use algorithms to amplify or suppress content. Content moderation teams decide what's harmful, often guided by vague community standards. Governments, including Canada, are stepping in. Are stepping in with laws like Bill C-63, which could force platforms to remove harmful content or face fines. But here's the twist: these platforms are private companies, not public squares. They're not bound by the charter. So when they silence somebody, it's not technically censorship, it's corporate discretion. Still, the effect is the same. Voices disappear, narratives shift, and public discourse becomes filtered through invisible hands. Beneath all of this is a deeper shift: the rise of emotional authority over intellectual resilience. People increasingly judge speech by how it makes them feel, not whether it's true or important. Discomfort is equated with danger. Offense becomes grounds for silencing. The result, a culture where fragility replaces fortitude, and disagreement feels like violence. This isn't just about politics, it's about the psychology of modern discourse. And it's reshaping everything from journalism to comedy to education. We're not just talking about speech, we're talking about the soul of democracy, the ability to speak freely, challenge power, and wrestle with uncomfortable truths is what keeps society alive. Comedy versus cancel culture, laughing on a tightrope. Comedy has always lived on the edge, poking at taboos, challenging norms, and making the uncomfortable funny. But in Canada, comedians are increasingly navigating a minefield of social media backlash, institutional pressure, and audience hypersensitivity. According to Canadian comedy historian Cliff Nestoroff, culture isn't new, it's just louder now. In the past, people wrote letters to editors. Today, every offended viewer has a megaphone. And comedians like Dave Chappelle have faced calls to remove Netflix specials over jokes about gender and identity. Canadian comics report feeling pressure to self censor, especially on university campuses and CBC affiliated platforms. And the line between onstage persona and offstage behavior is blurring. Nesterkoff warns you can't insult people on stage, but not at the grocery store. A recent thesis from Ryerson University found that while cancel culture doesn't outright silence comedians, it amplifies scrutiny and increases the risk of reputational damage. The real shift: audience now expect comedians to be morally aligned, not just funny. Canada versus Europe regulating online speech. Now let's flip the spotlight to the digital stage because Canada's Online Harms Act, Bill C-63, is part of a global wave of legislation trying to tame the chaos of online speech. And Canada's approach: introduce a digital safety commission to oversee platforms, allows anonymous reporting of harmful content, includes preemptive restrictions. You can be penalized for speech you might say. Critics call it a blueprint of privatized government censorship, especially with vague definitions of harm. Europe's model, Germany, forces platforms to remove hate speech within 24 hours or face fines. UK's Online Safety Act targets child exploitation and suicide-related content. The EU's Digital Service Act focuses on transparency, algorithm audits, and user rights, less punitive, more procedural. Canada is trying a system-based model inspired by medical diagnostics treating the root causes of online harm, not just the symptoms. But critics warn it could become a tool for ideological control if not carefully balanced. So, where does this leave us? We're in moments where comedians are being judged like politicians and platforms are being treated like governments. The stakes are high. Can we laugh without fear? Can we speak without being flagged? Can we disagree without being dehumanized? Speech isn't just words, it's identity. For some, speech is survival. Think of whistleblowers, activists, or marginalized voices who speak out against injustice. For others, speech is a minefield where one wrong word can cost a job, a reputation, or even personal safety. And then there's the rest of us trying to navigate what's honest versus what's acceptable, what's brave versus what's reckless, what's offensive versus what's misunderstood. Not everyone walks that line because not everyone has to. Privilege plays a role, so does platforms, so does fear. And the real complexity, speech isn't just about what's said, it's about who is saying it, where is it being said, how is it received, what power dynamics are at play. A comedian on stage, a professor in a lecture hall, a teenager on TikTok, they all face different expectations and consequences. And that's what makes speech so complex. It's not governed by one rule book, but by thousand invisible ones. So what do we do? Encourage resilience, not fragility. Promote dialogue, not dogma. Accept discomfort, not just consensus. Discomfort isn't one size fits all, it's a spectrum. And what rattles one person might barely register for another. That's what makes regulating speech so tricky. Discomfort is subjective, but laws and policies need objective standards. Intellectual discomfort, this is the good kind, the kind that challenges your beliefs, forces you to think deeper, and maybe even changes your mind. An example, a debate on immigration policy or gender roles that makes you reconsider your assumptions. Emotional discomfort, this hits closer to the heart. It might feel like an attack on your identity, values, or lived experiences. An example, a joke about religion or trauma that feels insensitive or degrading. Social discomfort, this is about fear of judgment, exclusion, or backlash, and what makes people self censor in classrooms, workplaces, or online. An example, a student avoiding conversational opinion in class because they fear being labeled. The psychological harm, this is where discomfort crosses into real damage, like hate speech that incites violence or persistent harassment that erodes mental health. An example, targeted online abuse or speech that dehumanizes a group. Why it matters? In Canada, the law tries to draw the line at harm, not just discomfort. But in practice, discomfort often gets treated like harm, especially in institutions trying to avoid controversy. That's where the tension lies. Protecting people versus protecting ideas, avoiding offense versus encouraging debate, creating safe spaces versus preserving free spaces. Discomfort isn't just a feeling, it's a signal. Challenge, you're being asked to rethink something you've always believed. Threat, you feel your identity or values are under attack. Growth, you're stepping outside your comfort zone, and that's uncomfortable by design. Alienation, you're being excluded or misunderstood in a space that should feel safe. And here's the kicker: discomfort isn't always bad. In fact, some of the most transformative moments in history, civil rights movements, revolutions, scientific breakthroughs, were born from people sitting in discomfort and refusing to look away. But not all discomfort is productive. Some is weaponized, used to silence, shame, or intimidate. That's where the line gets blurry. And are we protecting people from harm or shielding them from challenge? Navigating the landscape in society that values free speech, we have to ask, are we creating space for productive discomfort, the kind that leads to dialogue and growth? Or are we letting destructive discomfort, the kind that shuts people down, take over? And why dialogue matters? It humanizes disagreement. When you talk to someone face to face, or even like this, you're likely less to reduce them to a label. It reveals nuance. Most people aren't purely left or right, progressive or conservative. They're a mosaic of beliefs shaped by experience. It builds resilience. Engaging with opposing views strengthens your own thinking. It forces you to refine, not retreat. And here's the kicker: real dialogue isn't about winning, it's about listening to understand, not just wanting to respond. The cost of silence when discussion is shut down, whether by censorship, fear, tribalism, we lose. Innovation, new ideas often come from uncomfortable places. Empathy, without hearing others, we stop caring about their struggles. Accountability, power goes unchecked when dissent is silenced. Transformative in the way that it doesn't just inform, it reshapes. A truly transformable conversation doesn't leave you where you found it or it found you. It nudges your perspective, deepens your understanding, or even shifts your values. It's not just about exchanging words, it's about exchanging meaning. Intellectual transformation, you walk in with one belief and walk out questioning it. An example, a debate on free speech that makes you realize you've been conflating discomfort with harm. Emotional transformation, you feel seen, heard, or challenged in a way that stirs something deeper. An example, a conversation about identity or trauma that helps you process your own experiences differently. Social transformation, you connect across divides, political and cultural, generational, and build empathy where there was once judgment. An example, a discussion between a conservative and a progressive that doesn't end in agreement but ends in respect. In self awareness transformation, you discover something about yourself, about your bias, your blind spots, your strengths. An example, realizing you've been silent on issues that matter to you and deciding to speak up. Now, when we go back um, to what's on freedom of speech, and what's allowed. So going back to Jordan Peterson, his his training that he had to take, sensitivity. Um, being that he's a clinical psychologist. He doesn't practice it or teaches it anymore. And part of his argument is saying that he was speaking outside of the profession. So people say, okay, well, what kind of why would he have to take this sensitivity training, social media sensitivity training? So his argument beyond Bill C-16, the Accountability Act or the Accountability Gap, and since then, Peterson public commentary has expanded far beyond pronouns. He's mocked individuals by name, including journalists, academics, and public figures. He's dead named and misgendered trans individuals, including Elliot Page, which led to a suspension from Twitter. He's made inflammatory remarks about body images, climate change, and social justice. He used his platform to shame others, often in ways that critics say are cruel or dehumanizing. And when challenged by the College of Psychologists of Ontario, by courts, or by the public, he often doubles down, framing the pushback as ideological persecution rather than professional accountability. Legal versus ethical responsibility. Peterson's speech is protected under Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but as the Ontario Divisional Court ruled in 2023, freedom of expression doesn't exempt professionals from regulation, especially when their public statements risk harm and undermine public trust. So while he may claim to be acting as a private citizen, the impact of the words isn't private, it's public, powerful, and often polarizing. It's okay because now you're acting as a private citizen that you can go online and just publicly shame somebody. That's what he is saying. He's a licensed psychologist. Like I said, he doesn't teach it anymore. He doesn't practice. Doesn't matter who you are, politician. Become a private citizen, and now is it okay to go online and publicly shame people, degrade people? This is why he forgets, when his argument was the bill C-16. That was his argument. People don't know about the rest of it, what I'm just telling you now, of the shaming that he did online. Harmful. And that somehow, because, he maybe he thinks that because he holds a title as as like a psychologist or even a doctor or a politician or a police officer or teacher or anything like that, was saying, oh, that's okay. It's not okay. And when the recent incident, happened in Utah, and like I said earlier, violence solves nothing. There's going to be somebody else, and there's people out there who's going to step up to the plate. And those people, when it comes to freedom of speech and what they say, you know, like Charlie Kirk and like so many others, it's going to harm others. Now we know nothing about this person who shot him. You know, Donald Trump says it's the radical left's fault, and you know who he's talking about. We don't know, you know, what his politics are. We don't even know why he shot him. But what is this going to do, for the next individual who's going to be up on stage, controversial, overreaching what freedom of speech is, shaming. It's not just about shaming. I mean, when you talk about people, if you're going to talk publicly about people's gender or their religion or the color of their skin, you better watch out what you're talking about. You better watch out what you say. And if you're going to use hate speech, that's a crime. Though I think it was a week or two before this recent shooting of somebody publicly speaking. She gets up on stage and she gets shot. Donald Trump was shot at. Whether we like him or not, violence solves nothing. Ideology, expression, freedom of speech. Where do we draw the line? Expression, when you express yourself, how are you expressing yourself? Are you doing it verbally? Are you speaking? Are you using signage? Are you writing it? How we navigate the our social platforms? Even like, Twitter, now X, you know, when Elon Musk took over, and people like Jordan Peterson, people like Donald Trump, and others, he allowed them back on the platform. These prominent figures. You think about, people, maybe, I don't know, people, speak before they think. But then remember, if you had said something that's harmful, you can't take it back. Our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and maybe, people, misunderstand what Section 1 says. Yes, we have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And our Charter of Rights and Freedoms are not absolute. And that's in Section 1 of the Charter. You can't just say whatever you want and thinking there's no recourse, because there is. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show this morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for coming out. And you're probably thinking, what is with the title name of the show? North of Fair, Conversations Without Barriers, instead of Truckers Podcast, FYI. Well, I felt that, you know, with the title, the Truckers Podcast, people probably just thinking it's just about trucking and the industry and all this stuff. And I got thinking, but I used that title for a long time. And I figured, well, something different. Let's bring up a different logo and stuff. So North of Fair. North is Canada, and I'm rooted in my Canadian values. Fair is the floor, and I'm aiming higher. That's why the change. A title is just cosmetic, but North of Fair resonates with me and who I am. So take care, enjoy. Well, it's the weekend. Got things to do. And if this is the time of year too. Um, you know, we have the fair, the annual fair going on here in the city. It's, tomorrow is the last day. You know, um, so for 9 days, this goes on at this time of year. So if you live in London or nearby, even a couple hours away, you can come down, and if the fair is something that you're interested in doing, You like the rides, you like the food, get out there, enjoy it, and enjoy whatever else you're going to do over the weekend. And be safe out there. This is North of Fair Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug. Thank you for joining me, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.